best way to keep in touch with sole parent beneficiaries at a time when we know that their circumstances frequently change at 14 to 16 weeks after starting to receive the benefit. There's no sinister intent. This should be a check-in and not a checking up.
That's right. Good answer.
Order. Order. Question number 8, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. My question is to the Minister of Education. Is she satisfied that the government's educational priorities are leading to an improvement in student achievement? If so, why?
Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, yes, although we constantly strive to do better. Why? Because the data speaks for itself. The highest ever ECE participation rate at 95.8%. National standards show an overall improvement, with nearly 3/4 of our students on average above or at national standards. Last year we had the highest number of school leavers achieving NCEA Level 2 than ever before, 74% of school leavers. Exemptions have fallen from over 4,000 under the opposition to just 300 under this government. And furthermore, Mr Speaker, Andreas Schleicher, Special Advisor on Education Policy at the OECD and responsible for PISA, noted in an email to me late last week that many of the school policies that New Zealand is now pursuing are very much in line with the conclusions in the OECD International Report, What Makes Schools Successful.
Supplementary question.
Order. Order. Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Why did the government cut funding for school science and technology advisors? And does she now accept, in light of our recent plunge on the OECD rankings from 13th to 23rd in science, that that was a mistake?
Employ Colin Craig to advise on site.
Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, we have introduced a number of student achievement functioned advisors because we're interested in raising achievement fall. We've focused on maths and science through those particular experts. We've also introduced the Learning and Change Networks, which focus on issues like that. And last week we invested $10.5 million into science and maths resources, having answered the question.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Order.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Order. Point of order, Chris Hipkins.
Mr Speaker, the question was asked the Minister.
I don't need the question repeated. I'm going to ask the member to repeat the question.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.
But to be fair to the Minister, it was very difficult to hear the question as it was delivered, which may have been part of the challenge.
I'm happy to speak louder, Mr Speaker.
What would be helpful just to get the cooperation of the member's own colleagues as the question is asked.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Why did the government cut the funding for school science and technology advisors? And does she now accept, in light of our recent plunge in the OECD rankings from 13th to 23rd in science, that that was a mistake?
Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, because we decided to put that funding into student achievement advisors that would work across the entire curriculum, including in maths, science and technology. We also decided that we would target resources to those who needed them most. We also decided to invest in research that told us, for instance, that 40% of teachers don't feel confident to teach science and maths, and so we're investing to make sure they do have that confidence and will raise their teaching practice.
Supplementary question. Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Why did the government cut $35 million from teacher to professional development in its first budget in 2009, and in light of her statement yesterday that New Zealand's decline in OECD rankings was partly due to, quote, underinvestment in raising teaching practice, end quote, will she now admit that that was a mistake as well?
Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, under this government we're investing on average $70 million a year in professional learning and development. $70 million a year. We've also taken heed of what the sector wanted, which was to have more of it distributed out in the regions. However, in listening to the profession and hearing that they still don't think it's quite right, I announced this week that we would review professional learning and development and are involving all of the organisations who have an interest in it, because the profession who we listen to have asked for it.
Supplementary
question, Paul Foster-Bell.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Supplementary to the Minister of Education, How does New Zealand compare with other countries participating in PISA?
Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, New Zealand remains above the OECD average, and the highest achieving students in New Zealand are comparable with the best in the world. And I'm sure all of us in this House are pleased about that. But there is now no doubt we are facing an achievement challenge. Fortunately, this government has been working to a plan to address this. The other countries that we benchmark ourselves against, Australia, Canada, Sweden, Finland, have to varying degrees declined. I'm sure the opposition is interested going by their response. While the performance of education systems in Asia, Shanghai, China, Hong Kong, China, Singapore, for example, continues to rise. This is both a national and global challenge that we can and must rise to, and that's why our government and I, as Minister of Education, is focused on raising achievement for every one of our children.
Supplementary question, Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, why does she continue to attribute our drop in the OECD rankings to the rise of Asian countries when New Zealand has been overtaken by countries, among them Liechtenstein, Estonia, Poland, Ireland, Belgium, Germany, Austria, Australia, Slovenia, Denmark? Or perhaps we should focus a little bit more on delivering a broad, balanced curriculum that might include things like geography.
Honourable Hekia Parata.
Mr Speaker, because regrettably this is a complex issue, and unfortunately for the member, linear single correlations don't actually work here. So what the PISA data tells us is that there are a range of challenges, and we have a plan focusing on each and every one of them.
Mr Speaker.
Supplementary question, Chris Hipkins.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Mr Speaker, how much money has been spent on the implementation of national standards in primary and intermediate schools, and how does that compare with the amount the Ministry of Education spends on teacher professional development in reading, writing, maths and science?
Mr Speaker, I don't have to hand the precise figure about the development and implementation of national standards. I don't have that precise figure to hand. But what I can tell you is that we invest $304 million over 4 years in the professional learning and development of teachers.
Question number 9. Point of order, the Honourable Trevor Mallard.
I seek leave to table in the House a map showing
Order.
Europe is not an Asia.
Order. Order. Most members have no trouble, Mr Mallard, in finding a map to have a look at where countries are. Question number 9, Jackie Dean.
Thank you, Mr Speaker.